What started off as something simple and easy has become anything but. So this is my update on History Quest, the early times. To give a bit of context, I have a second grader, 7 years old, who's in the gifted program at local public school. But my child is very curious about the world, and he's been really interested in history and learning more about it. So that's why I picked up History Quest, the early times, to get us started and dip our toes into ancient history. This curriculum is fairly simple. It has a more narrative aspect of a certain civilization. It does a history hop where it has a short story from like a first person's point of view as a time traveler into these ancient times, and kind of learns a little bit about like a worker or a scribe or something like that. And it's paired with a study guide that has like additional material to help kind of flesh out some activities and things to do, also some additional reading. There is also the supplement of having a world history encyclopedia. I think it recommends the Kingfisher one, but I couldn't get my hands on it, so I had the Usborne one instead. But I think they're fairly similar, so it's not that big of an issue. What has happened is that, let me open this up here, is that as you can see, we've kind of read half of the book already. And what was interesting is that my child really loved all of the stories, and so we just went chapter after chapter, and we just kept going through a lot of the narrative in the story. And my child still wanted to know more. I mean, if we let him have his say, we probably would have finished the entire book by now. So I had to take a step back and do a little bit more digging. My child wanted to know more things. He wanted a little bit more detail. And the funny thing is that the information in the Usborne Encyclopedia was just not enough for him. Like, he would just devour that in like several minutes, and then he'll be like, okay, what's next? And that kind of put me at a loss. So I kind of put a hard stop on the narrative, and then we're kind of backtracking, and we're kind of going through the civilizations a little slower, a little deeper, and a little bit with a little bit more focus. So I really wanted to flesh out the civilizations a little bit more, give a little bit more interesting examples. So I picked A Child Through Time and the Ancient World's Atlas. And while it did work for a bit, I quickly realized that we would only go through like one page of this book per civilization. So while it's good to have like a good overview, this didn't really hold my child's attention as much. So it was nice having these kind of overviews to kind of see like where it is on the map, or what a child may have dressed like, or what their life was kind of like at this time. When we were just diving into one specific civilization, things were just like very nominal. Like, it didn't seem as helpful, and it just kind of like almost seemed a little bit like time filler. The same thing with this Ancient Worlds book. It looks really cool. It goes over one civilization per 2-page spread, and I think the pictures are really lovely, but once again, it's like we're going through just one topic, then we only go through like one 2-page spread. So this last book is kind of like I guess kind of similar to like history year by year, but with a more generalized look at things. And it's kind of telling like a general like long-term history of like how certain empires rose and fell, and different details and stuff like that. But using it as part of the study was also not as helpful. Like, this was more just like if you wanted to know the grand history of people, and I think that was helpful in that aspect. But unless you were familiar with certain time periods or certain civilizations, like just blending them all together was quite confusing for my child. So using these kind of overview, using these like larger overview resources weren't really helpful for us. So we really had to like focus and narrow down on one specific civilization at a time for us to really benefit from it overall. This book is kind of what I'm kind of looking for my child. So before we camp out at Egypt, I want to know a little bit more about Africa, just because like I don't think there's a lot of information on that. And I happened to find this book, which seems really cool. It has a lot of pictures of the objects and kind of like mementos and things to kind of just create more of a visual look and feel for these civilizations. We've been really enjoying it, learning about some of the civilizations before Egypt, or when concurrent to ancient Egypt at the same time, and just like really looking and getting a feel for the place and the location and all of that. So the Usborne Encyclopedia does go over a little bit about other civilizations similar to Egypt in Africa, but it's basically this 1-2 page spread, and that's it. In the Africa book specifically, it has about 70 pages about like pre-medieval history of Africa, and so that is a lot more detail and kind of more of what we're looking for. So an example of the differences is that on the left side you see kind of this small little paragraph about Aksum, and here on the Africa book we have a 2-page spread. Well, that's not a huge amount of detail, so it kind of gives us a little bit more information, and then from there we can use this as a jumping off point to dive into further detail about this specific empire, or if we're not as interested, then we can move on and do other things. But I am really grateful for having this book, and I know that the Africa book, it talks about the African empires, and they came more in prominence in kind of like the medieval times. So while we only use about the first 100 pages of this book right now for the early times, I know later on it'll go into more in depth about medieval and modern history. So when it comes to the History Quest study guide, it has a lot of activities and some comprehension questions and some copywriting and a couple other things to kind of help solidify the information. But for my child, he just wasn't having it. Like, he just didn't enjoy the comprehension questions, and he didn't really want to do all the activities. So we really had to figure out ways that would engage him and that would interest him. So one thing we started doing was adding the timeline. And we have this history timeline notebook, and we've been using it in conjunction with some of the stickers from the History Quest, I guess, like pack. And we've been adding it to our timelines. And he's really enjoying seeing the timeline unfold as we go through all these different civilizations. So an example of one of the activities we did was when we were studying Paleolithic people and Neolithic people, we made a Venn diagram and how some of the things kind of overlapped and some of the things were different. And not everything is exactly 100% correct, but we were working on this and we were discussing it so that he has an idea of what are the differences, what are the similarities, and was just able to put it on paper in a way that was helpful for him and didn't require too much writing because he's still in 2nd grade. So using History Quest as kind of the floor to our studies, there is really no ceiling as to how in-depth and where we should go as we continue on learning about the ancient civilizations. The first major one that we are encountering is ancient Egypt. So I found the ancient Egypt book, The Definitive Visual History, which is very similar to the Africa book, but it's only focusing on ancient Egypt itself. In conjunction with that, I picked up this Ancient Egypt Gift of the Nile. This is considered like a gifted curriculum. So this one focuses less on like the narrative aspect of learning the content of the history of Egypt, and more so using more problem-solving skills and more abstract thinking. So it will kind of do some research on primary sources. It's able to kind of think about the civilization as a whole, and how like farming or other inventions have kind of influenced this civilization, helped it interact with trade networks and other stuff like that. So I'm using the lesson plans from the Ancient Egypt curriculum, and we're going to use the Ancient Egypt, like this book, as the spine to really bring everything together. So like the first 4 lessons in this book, it kind of creates like a background context for how the rest of these lessons are going to be set up. And right now we're kind of starting to get into like how does farming work, and how did that influence the rise of culture and all of that. So I think this is going to be a really good way for my child to kind of dive deeper into studying a specific civilization and coming up with kind of higher order questions, more Socratic discussions, and more deeper thinking. So instead of going through like a million different types of civilizations, we're going to camp out in ancient Egypt and try to do a little bit of a deeper dive into what it's all about. Now, this curriculum is primarily used for a classroom setting, and so some of the grower group projects and group discussions and things like that will have to be more limited in that way, but I think we're still able to use it and adapt it for our purposes so that my child is able to better understand how these ancient civilizations really grew and thrived. So as we dive into ancient Egypt, we have that new spine, we have lesson plans, and I really want to add some of the Egyptian myths so we can understand kind of like the religion and the faith and the perspective of what the Egyptians thought. So how they view the world is very different from us. And by learning a little bit about what they view as important, what they view as their gods, and how they worship and all of that stuff is actually quite vital, because like everything they kind of do kind of centers around their faith up until a certain point. So while we're not taking a fully secular or biblical point of view, I just want to create and understand like some of the stories that they have, and the folk tales and all of that stuff, so that we have a better, fuller understanding of what the people believed and what the people thought at the time. Not only are we reading the Egyptian myths, but we're adding a little bit of narrative fiction into this as well. So we have The Magic Tree House, Mummies in the Morning. That one's like a really quick read. I think my kid already read it, and he wasn't really a fan, but we're just gonna go through it, and we'll focus more on the Egyptian elements rather than the story itself, so that we can kind of get more out of it. The second one is Ra the Mighty. This is a series of like cat detective-like books, and I think the first book was already like checked out of the library, but it has like a whole slew of the rest of the series. So we just picked like I think it's the book 2 of this, and then we're just kind of reading it through. And so far my child really likes it because it's kind of funny and silly. And the third one is the Egyptian Diary, the Journal of Nakht. This book we haven't really dived into yet, but I think this will be good to kind of get an idea of what the average person's life was like in ancient Egypt. This is not going to be all in. I think as we go on, we'll probably add more book resources or online resources to really give us a better way of understanding ancient Egypt, and then we'll incorporate some hands-on activities and stuff as well to really make it more fun and engaging. I discovered that my child really likes the non-fiction aspect of history. So like when we're going through the Africa book and looking at the sculptures, looking at the pictures and artifacts and stuff, he's really engaged in that, and he loves listening to it, even though for me it might seem a little dry and boring, but he is really absorbing and loving it. And with the narrative fiction, I think he's thinking of it more like just a general story and not necessarily like history. So for him, he doesn't really like put the two together yet, except it's like, oh yeah, it happens in, you know, this context or in this environment. So he's really kind of making a lot of parallels and drawing a lot of inferences between these resources. And it's really exciting for me to see that and see him engaged and have so much excitement for history. This is kind of like the biggest shift that I have in our kind of homeschool enrichment so far, is that history has kind of been taking a really deep dive. So we're probably going to be working on Egypt for quite some time and dive into it. And then later we'll probably move towards kind of like the Middle East, Babylonian empires and stuff to do another deep dive like this. And then as we go through, we'll use history quests as like our basis. And then from there, we just jump and do our rabbit trails and dive on through. As for strict lesson plans, I don't think I have anything aside from like this ancient Egypt one. I think they also have one for ancient China, but they don't really have it for a lot of other major civilizations. So I think once I get a handle on going through the lesson plans here, I think it'll give me a better idea and framework for me to structure the rest of the history lessons from here. So if you have any questions, please let me know. And if you have any advice on how to study history, especially early civilizations, with a gifted child, please let me know. I'm always on the lookout for good resources and things that will help my child really learn and engage with history. And so far, he has like a really strong passion and interest in this. So I'm just going to go with it. But for now, I think I'm feeling a little bit better about how to do the history unit for my child. So overall, I think History Quest is a good introduction, but it's not enough for my child. So what can work for most kids just doesn't work for my child. He just wants to know so much more. We're just diving deeper and going into more detail. And so we're just going to work on this kind of like content narrative aspect, and then also working on some like historian study skills or historian research skills on like how to understand sources and all of that, and kind of take it in a more abstract realm. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.